Thanks very much, Alex. Thanks very much. Evening, everybody. Really good, as Alex says, to see some familiar names and faces, which is great. But also some new ones as well, which is just as good. So, thanks ever so much for joining us. Do keep putting those names and roles and clubs, CBs, etc., in the chat that as you join, which is great. And just to reiterate what Alex has said, if you've got questions for us as we go through, then use that Q&A function and Viv is going to monitor that for us. So, a couple of quick introductions actually for those of us who are on the webinar tonight. We've got myself, so I'm the player pipeline manager, working on the age grade game and game in the education sector as well for the RFU. And then we've also got Viv Rimmer. Viv, many of you will know, particularly our safeguarding colleagues, who's our head of safeguarding at the RFU. So there's Viv, who's going to monitor that Q&A for us tonight. And we've also got David Barnes. So David is our Discipline and Game Governance Director. And many of you will know David, hopefully not too many of you, because that means you've been in trouble if you know him. But lots of people know David as well, who's going to help deliver the session this evening as well. So what we're going to do tonight, if I just flick on the next bit, we've got sort of four areas we're going to look at. And specifically around playing out of age grade. What are the regulations playing out of age grade? What are the processes to apply for those? And then a bit of a do's and don'ts section as well. And between each of those, before we get into a general Q&A at the end, we'll open it up. We are going to take questions about the specific areas that we talk about. So we'll look at that first piece, have a bit of a break, and Viv will give us some of the questions that have been asked. We'll attempt to answer those, then move on to the next section. We're aiming to be done by 8 o'clock at the latest, and that Q&A at the end, we can open that up to other areas as well that might help everybody. So that's the plan for the evening. One thing that we're really keen to do at the outset, though, is sort of lay out the rationale, if you like, for playing out of age grade. And it's really important, I think, to emphasise that the default priority of the game in this country is that players play in their appropriate age grade. That's the starting point. It's how the game works in England, and it always has been, because that's where there are major benefits for that individual player. It's where their peers are, the people they've lived with, played with, grown up with. It's where they've got those who are the same age, who are at the same stage of their development in life, their same academic circumstances, and under 16, you've got your colleagues going through your GCSEs with you. It's where those that support those young people, parents, coaches, teachers, are connected as well. And of course, as well as being the people they've grown up with, it's where those who actually are coaching them or working with them have expertise in their age group as well. So there are loads and loads of really strong benefits of why we have a default that players play in that age group together. And which is why playing out of age grade is always the exception, and the regulations are written in that perspective. So the basis of this is about the safety, the welfare, and the safeguarding of that player, but also, of course, those who are working with the player as well. So really important to emphasize that at the outset. It's about us making sure that playing out of age grade is always an exception to our default of them playing within the age grade. And of course, there are lots of things we can do to field teams in terms of recruitment retention strategies, all those sorts of things within an age group before we even have to think about doing things with other age groups. And we'll have a number of coaches on tonight who are good at sharing players, flexing the numbers on the pitch, modifying the rules of play for an age group before we have to think about breaking all those benefits that I've outlined and the principles that we've talked about of playing in your default age group. So just to reiterate, playing out of age grade is the exception, and the regulations recognise there might be times when that is something that needs to be done, and it also defines the circumstances, the conditions, what's required in terms of assessment and application to be able to do that before we do break those benefits of being in your own age group and look at exceptions. So that's what we're going to cover tonight. It's really important to emphasize that at the outset. So what are the regulations themselves? And many of you will be aware of these. This is all enshrined, and it's probably one of the key elements of Regulation 15, which is the regulation for the age grade game, for age grade rugby in England. And that covers, as well as playing up and down out of age grade, it covers things like out of season, and other elements of the game, the calendar, and all those sorts of things. But what we're going to focus on tonight is the playing out of age grade. And what we've got is circumstances under which we can play out of age grade, and they're pretty well defined in that regulation. And that's a really important point as well, that we make sure those regulations are succinct and very specific about, as I said earlier, those circumstances under which we can play out of age grade. So the first one there is combining, and combining is a little bit different from the others because combining is about a group of players. And it's specifically enabling players to play out of age grade with another age group, either up or down one age group. And it's about supporting retention of players as a group, this, rather than the other playing out of age grades. They're about the individual player. It's about supporting those players to play with another age group if they have got low numbers. Those are the circumstances under which you can apply for a combining out of age grade. So it's all about where we need to try and keep numbers together in order to play games. We already have dual age bands in the girls' games, so there's a form of automatic combining in the girls' games with our under 14, 16, and 18 age groups. That's the same in the boys under 18s as well. 17s and 18s is also automatic, so we don't have to apply for combining there. But there are circumstances in the boys' game that if there aren't enough numbers, then you can apply to combine up or down one age group between under 12 and under 16. Approval is required for that, and that will be the case obviously for all of these. And if you do combine, only a third of the players from an older age group can play in that, be on the pitch at a time, sorry. And you also play to the lower age group. So really quick example, if your under 15s were combined with your under 14s, there'd be only a third of those players could be under 15 on the pitch, and they would be playing to the under 14 rules. So that's combining, as I say, for a group of players. For playing up, is about, so we're now talking about individual players. If it's of more benefit for a player and their development to play up an age group than all those principles of playing within their age group, then again, that can be applied for. And this can take place for under 11 girls, can play up to under 12. Under 12 to 16 boys can play up. Obviously, there's a form of playing up in the girls' game there in our dual age bands already. And just one exception to that at the lower age groups, under 9 to 11, if a child is educated in the year above, they can also apply to play up because that's obviously who they're playing their sport with on a regular basis in school. So that would obviously follow through potentially. Doesn't happen very often in those younger age groups, but it is something we've recognised again in trying to make the regulations available to help players to play. That's an option as well. Again, approval is required based on a good assessment of those players, and we will come on to, as per the intro, how you go through that approval process. So that's playing up. Playing down, you can apply this under three circumstances. So if a player is in the younger academic year, so for example, a year 11 aged player is actually educated at year 10, then that could be a circumstance under which you could apply to play down. If a player is a particularly small stature or has a developmental or a behavioural issue that would mean it's more suited for them to play down a year, then that would be another option. And then specifically for under 19s who are in their third year of study, sort of year 14s at school or college, there's some specific circumstances to play down as well for them. So those are the circumstances in which players can play down. And again, we're talking about an approval process, assessment, and an application to be able to do that. And all those three, so combining playing up and down, that is a 1 year application and approval, and so that would need to be applied for on an annual basis. Slightly different is when we get into playing adult rugby. And here we're talking about 17-year-olds. So when a player reaches their 17th birthday, they could apply to play adult rugby. And again, that's if it's suitable for them to do so. And this is, as it says, a two-stage process. Stage one is about the club itself being approved as a place and something that has everything in process and in place that is required and appropriate for basically a child. A 17-year-old is still a child to play in an adult contact rugby team game and environment, which clearly is a big, risk area, and that's why it's such a detailed process. So stage one is that club needs to apply for the ability to be able to play that individual up, and they need to prove that they have all the right safeguarding people and processes in place that would enable them to be able to do that. And again, that's on an annual basis. They would make that application, and if approved, that would last for a year. Stage two is about the individual player. So very similar to playing up and playing down, it's assessment of that individual and their appropriateness to play in adult rugby. And that lasts up until their 18th birthday. So if a 17-year-old in their under 17 year was approved to play up, that would go right through into their under 18 year until they hit their 18th birthday. And then they're an adult player potentially and could play as an adult player on their 18th birthday, although they might obviously choose to still play at under 18 as well. And most players do play still, as we've said before, in their under 17 and under 18 age bands, because that is the most appropriate place for them to play rugby. And then just finally on this one, there is also specific regulations around our pathway players. So these are players who are in academy rugby or in PDG rugby for the girls, and they have separate approval forms and separate processes that go through the RFU performance department and academy teams, and that's to ensure that if they're going to play out of age grade, that is absolutely fitting in with what is a much more intense playing program that they will have because of the number of different environments they're playing in and the intensity of what they play as well. So that has to go through a specific process. So again, if clubs or schools or colleges have those players in their system and want to play them out of age grade as an exception, then they would do that on those specific forms. But as I've said before I pause, there are specific circumstances, specific requirements of assessment and approvals needed before a player can play in those out of their age grade. So that's sort of a bit of a what are the regulations. I'm just going to hand over to David, who's going to talk a little bit about what happens when people get it wrong. Over to you, David.
Hi, thanks, Mark. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for the questions. I'll give Mark a chance to breathe and have a quick read of the questions, and obviously we'll pick those up later in the session. I think the primary point is here that we don't want things to go wrong. We want this process to work. We want you to feel confident in your assessments and why you're doing it. But it is really, really important we get this right, and that's why we do have regulations in place, and there are ultimately sanctions if we don't get it right, or sorry, if the process isn't followed. Player welfare has to be the key consideration for all of this. We have to be looking at the individual, and sometimes I've been made aware of cases where people are wanting to play players out of age grade. Typically, for me, I see more 17-year-olds just because of the nature of my role. CBs tend to pick up the more playing out of age grade. But, what's a valid reason and what's not a valid reason? And I have seen examples of children moved out of age grades and put in different age grades because of potentially of conflicts with parents, as in the parents of the child and other parents in the group. that's not a valid reason to play someone out of an age grade. Um, Similar for a player, if there are conflicts within the player group, that's not a valid reason to play someone out of age grade. They need to be assessed appropriately, and that's got to be the primary consideration. I often see the concern or see the point raised that 17-year-olds are played up to make sure that there's a team to be filled. Again, that's not a valid reason. We must be looking at the individual here. And that's what all the assessment process is. It's on the individual, not the team. And that's the most important thing. As I say, welfare has got to be key to all this. Mark, can you just tap it forward one for me, please? Oh, okay. My slide hasn't updated. If you go back, I will work off my own slides. So I'll circulate the slides later, and I was obviously too late putting the slides together. So just bear with me slightly. In terms of sanctions, so these are all listed within Regulation 19. That's on the RFU website, and also within Regulation 15. But as I say, I'll put the links in the slides that will get sent round. And there's two different sanction frameworks. One's for playing out of age grade, so an under 12 playing in a different age group, or the other sanction is for 17-year-olds playing in adult rugby. And as I say, this is the one where I tend to see the most concerns raised. In terms of process, if we are aware of a 17-year-old playing up without correct permissions, then ultimately this is a sanctionable offence. And like in exactly the same way that if you punch someone on the field, the decision will be, there'll be an assessment of seriousness. Is it a low, mid, or a top end breach? It's exactly the same. And within Regulation 19 appendices, you'll see the guidelines for playing out of age grade or 17-year-olds playing up. But essentially, there's mid-range, there is low, mid, and top end entry points. And the sanctions that can come from playing a 17-year-old outside without the correct permissions include education. So there can be at the lower end a direction that a seminar is put on for all the age groups to understand what they need to do. And then as you move up the more seriousness, you can have suspension of the coach or the person responsible for picking the team. And then ultimately there can be a points deduction, and the points deduction is off the first team. So if there is a 17-year-old playing adult rugby, or also if there is children playing out of age grade, and this has happened on more than one occasion during the season, then there is the potential for the first team to lose points, league points or merit table points, depending where they play. That's because of the seriousness that we see this, and it's important that we make sure, as I say, that player welfare is key to this. Outside of the RFU regulations, I think it is important to state as well that obviously we have a duty of care to the players, and if we are breaching regulation or if players are playing outside without regulation, then obviously there are potential other implications around liability, and whether if breaching a regulation, how that liability cover is impacted. So if in doubt, make sure that you are following the process. I hope that we don't have to sanction anyone, but I just wanted to reiterate that the sanctions are significant. And if I give you an example of a mid-range breach of 17-year-olds, we're talking about, and a mid-range breach could be just playing in a game and no injury occurs, or training with adults and injury occurs. And that could result in a up to 3 month suspension of the coach or the person involved in the team, and a 5 point mandatory deduction from the first team. So, as I say, significant sanctions, but that's because it is a really serious matter and we must ensure player welfare is paramount. But as I say, hopefully we won't have to use those, but it's important that everyone is aware.
Thanks very much, David. That's good information to obviously consolidate what we've talked about from the regulations itself.
Sorry, Mark,
Sorry,
Sorry,
yeah, go on, David, go on.
sorry to come in. I've got one other thing to add. Front row players, as an ex front rower, I think it's important to also understand that there's specific regulations about playing in the front row for 17-year-olds, and that cannot happen within the outside of the elite game. So regardless if they're 17 and they've got permission to play up, they cannot play in the front row unless it's part of the academy pathway. Sorry, Mark.
Thanks very much, David. Yes, sorry, I was just checking if I was on audio or not. That's great, thank you very much. Going to pause there, and Viv, just in terms of the what we've covered there, I know there have been some questions coming into the Q&A. Any specifics around sort of the what of the regulation before we move on to sort of the application processes and do's and don'ts?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I'll try to direct questions to the most appropriate person. If I don't answer or I don't pop your question to either Mark or David, it might be because I'm aware that those answers are likely to be coming a little bit later on, but I will get to a couple of those if that's okay. So we've had a question in relation to how many, or if there is a number in terms of thinking around any one team, how many are allowed to play up. So perhaps at the same team at the same time. We've had a couple of people just ask questions around that. So what would be your view, for example, of 8 players playing up in a squad of 22, for example? So not looking at combining necessarily, but is there a number within regulation other than the number that's applicable from combining?
Yeah, thanks, Viv. No, the simple answer is there isn't a number, so there isn't a limit. However, each application, and as David has mentioned as well, individual player and their appropriateness and their development to play up. Obviously, if you're taking 8 players out of one age group below, then potentially that age group is going to struggle as well. So that obviously needs to be part of the consideration. I think the other thing to definitely emphasize on this is that that feels more like a combining situation. And actually, is it really appropriate for 8 players to play out of their age group? That's what our county approvers would look at. And we'll come on to that, but they would, obviously look in depth at that, because what does that do to those players in the older age group who now potentially aren't going to play? So yes, it's about individual development and things, but it's also about the wider benefit to all the players, not just that individual. And that's why we'll come on to it. The applications now doesn't only talk about the player who's being applied for, it talks about the impact on other players, risk to other players, not only on your own team, but potential risk to other players in other teams as well. So there isn't a limit, is the short answer, but those are the sorts of things that would get looked at in depth by approvers.
Lovely, thank you. And Ross makes a really good point in relation to if a player has been authorised to play down and then subsequently plays in his or her own age group, then authorisation is null and void. But I'm raising that because it fits in with another question that we've had about whether or not a player, perhaps who's been assessed within their club as being more suitable to play down a year, but perhaps would be more suited in their school year to remain where they are, perhaps because the standard isn't so high within their school's rugby. Is that permissible?
So we're jumping ahead a little bit here.
Oh, I
But
apologise. Sorry.
no, that's fine. That's fine, because it is relevant as well to what we've just covered. So if a player plays down, that is, as Ross Q&A, that is for the season. So that player is applying to do that for the season. And that again is very clear, and so therefore the application needs to take account of that. The other thing in the application is, has everybody been consulted that is involved with that player, including the player parents, etc. as well? If they're playing at school and you want them to play out of age group in the club, you really should be thinking about what happens in their school as well, because the reasons for playing out of age grade are about their development. It sounds like would be in this case that would be the same challenge in a club as it would be in school. So to have separate ways of playing down would not be the case. They'd need to play in that age group in wherever they play in rugby in the country.
Lovely. Thanks, Mark. We've had a couple of questions, and David, you might be best placed to answer this in relation to the definition of contact rugby, I guess, and also whether or not there are, permissions for individual young people or to join just for training in terms of playing up, or training up or training down, or the combination of teams for such training.
Sure. So if I deal with the adult piece or the 17-year-old piece, and the same principle applies. So permission is needed for training and playing is the basic situation. So if we use 17 as an example, a 17-year-old training with adults must have permission and must have been assessed to do so. And by training, we mean any contact situation, be it tackling, rucking, mauling, line outs. They must be assessed for, and that includes any contact that involves pad work. So we have unfortunately come across examples where adults have held pads and children or people under 18 have been injured in that session. So we would class contact training as the use of pads as well as, sort of physical bone on bone contact. So yes, people must be assessed for training in exactly the same way. And the sanction table is slightly lower for people if there's a breach in training. But obviously, if there's repetitive breaches, then that would add up. So there is still sanctions for not being assessed appropriately to train with adults.
Thank you. I'm conscious that some of the other questions I think may be addressed in your next section, not to preempt you, Mark. So I might suggest that we move on now to the next section, if that's okay.
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, we'll pick them up after the next bit. Thanks, Viv. So we're just going to talk about process a little bit now, and this links into again some of what David talked about. So we now have and have had now for this will be our third season of application processes that are driven by national online forms. So everything is online, and those forms are available on the Regulation 15 page on englandrugby.com. Each form is at the bottom, so it's really clear the forms for clubs, schools, colleges, etc., and for the different forms of playing out of age grade. It is deliberately a robust and detailed process, as we've talked about. We're talking about risking safety, safeguarding welfare of players by not playing them in the core group that they should be playing in. Particularly when you take that example of essentially a child who's a 17-year-old playing with adult players, for example. So it's a big decision, first of all, to apply, and it's a big decision to approve an application as well. So the form does require the right information. It does require evidence and an account of the assessment that has taken place to assess that player's suitability to play out of age grade. It does ask for the right people have been involved in that as well. And that includes everyone around that individual player or the group of players in a combining situation. And there is a declaration in there that the proposer signs to say, yes, these people have all been part of this process, are aware of what we're proposing, and therefore agree with the application. That's really important because it's about the whole support group around the player or players involved, as well as those who might be in another age group as well. The approval form and process will then go to the approver team. And usually that approver team will be in your county, your constituent body group, and some applications, as I talked about earlier. So, for example, those player development group players will go to the RFU for approval. There are automated processes that will record and tell someone who's applying that their application has gone in successfully. You're also able to download a record of what you put in the form. And then that goes into an automated process for the approvers in the county or RFU, and you will then receive back if you've applied with a an approval or a declined response to that application. And that goes back to the people that have been named on that form and the email addresses that have been supplied. The forms, as I say, are automated and provide those messages for an applicant. And it's really important that until an application has been approved, that players must not play, because as David said earlier, until someone has an approval and they play out of age grade under that process, then that would be a breach of the regulations. And again, just reiterating, the regulations are absolutely there. They are robust because of the risk to player safety, safeguarding, and welfare of the individuals involved. And we need to be able to make sure that we're mitigating that risk. So that's the process that we go through. A number of you on this call will be involved in different ends of that process, maybe as an applicant or as an approver. And what we need to try and do, and we're probably talking here to the people who do understand, we need to keep spreading the word about these processes, the importance of them, and the importance of really detailed, good, and robust assessment of whether we think it is appropriate for players to play out of age grade, even before we're making those applications. But the processes have got, since we launched them, have been really well received. We've got really good feedback about them. The fact we are more consistent across the country than we used to be when there were individual processes that were differed between different counties is important. The final thing that I'm just going to mention on this bit, Viv, before we go to the questions, is that when we talk about involving the right people, it's really important that we have a safeguarding view on this. And many of the counties and constituent body approver teams will involve their safeguarding manager and their team within the county. It's good advice, we think, to make sure that in a club or school or college that your safeguarding people are also involved in making that application, because they will look at things from a different point of view from a parent or a coach in terms of safeguarding as well. So that involvement is not, there's a tick box on the applications to ensure that's being done. And it's really important to make sure that those things are done as per the declaration, rather than just saying it's being done. We have got examples, and counties have got examples where a declaration has been signed, and then someone else on the form has got in touch to say, I never had the faintest clue this was being proposed. And sometimes that's a parent whose child is being proposed to play out of age group and they never knew about it. That just isn't good enough, and that would definitely get declined, rightly so, by the approver team. So really important to make sure the right people are involved, and the processes really help you to be able to do that by asking the right sorts of questions. Viv, I'm going to pause there again. David, I don't know if you want to add anything, or we could go to the Q&A.
Yeah, no, from my point of view, Mark, you've covered most of it. There's quite a lot of questions in the Q&A that might be helpful for people, but you've covered the key parts there.
Thank you.
Thanks both. I'm conscious that we've got quite a lot of questions and quite a lot that are quite specific. I'm just wondering, it might be that it would be a good idea for us to put a Q&A document together potentially. I'm conscious with 22 questions we're running at now, we might not be able to answer all of those in depth. So I've tried to group together some of the questions where I can see them. So at what level and how many coaches should assess a player at clubs to play up into adult rugby?
So if I take this first, David might want to add in. We do have in the codes of practice, the age grade codes of practice, we have some support information about how to do an assessment. We actually want to try and improve that. And we're actually looking at providing an assessment template at the moment, Viv, that will talk about the types of people that should be involved in that, the number and level of coaches involved, and that already is within regulation, talks about a level 2, but it doesn't say how many different coaches. Sometimes that will be available to a club, for example, sometimes it won't be, and it's looking at that external view. But being able to demonstrate a really strong and detailed assessment, as I've said a few times now, is really important. So making sure the right types of people and coaches particularly have been involved in that is important. So that additional information we're going to provide will help with that. But definitely if you've got the coach of the team and someone who's able to almost give that second opinion in agreement, that would be a good starting point.
Lovely, thanks, Mark. And just a clarification, one, if that's okay. You mentioned about combining age groups, so from under 12s to under 16s. Can you confirm if there's an option to combine younger age groups, so such as under 10s and under 11s, if we don't have enough players to field a team at both age groups?
Yes, there is. If I did say that, that was a mistake. That was about playing down rather than combining teams. So yeah, combining at younger age groups is available as well. The table in Regulation 15.5 is really useful in terms of this. It breaks down by age group in the mixed age groups, the girls' age groups, and the boys' age groups. Both combining and playing up and playing down actually is in that table. So that gives you the answers in there. But yeah, combining at younger age groups is available as well to be applied for.
Lovely. Thanks, Mark. And David, I know that you spoke about kind of that definition, I guess, of contact rugby, and you also mentioned front row. Can under 17s play in the front row if the scrum is uncontested?
So no, we would say that they can't play in the front row uncontested. Obviously, other people can go in the front row. We would say that there is, whilst I appreciate it's a unlikely possibility, but we could still have some element of pushing, even if it's uncontested. So we would say no, under no circumstances should a 17-year-old play. And actually, sanctions could still apply if a 17-year-old played in the front row, even if it was uncontested. The starting point would be the sanction applied, and then mitigation will be considered. But yeah, best not to play any 17-year-olds at any point in the front row.
Lovely, thanks, David. And I know we've spoken about players playing down. So obviously the approval being voided, if you like, if they then begin playing in their own age group. What about if we've got players who are being approved to play up? So perhaps they are playing, they would be chronologically with the under 16s, and we've given them consent to play up. Are they able to continue playing both with their with the under 16s and also perhaps with perhaps up to under 18s rugby?
Yeah, Viv. So that it's different from playing down. So
Yep.
playing up, yes, you can come and go between your age group because remember that's about your development as a player and the circumstances to help you to develop as a player. So being able to still play back with your own age group is absolutely the case, and that would be the same for a 17-year-old playing adult rugby as well. And if I put my sort of retention hat on, it's really important. These players are often the ones who are your core group. To take them out of that group is a real risk to the future of that group of players, which is probably another good reason that people should think really carefully about playing players out of age grade and what it does to their core age group as well, which we know often isn't considered, but should be.
And just to add to that, Viv, if a 17-year-old is approved to play up, they can play up, and also they can play in their age group in exactly the same fashion. All we would say is you've got to manage workload, you've got to manage game time, and the player welfare still is priority here, and that needs to be managed properly.
Lovely, thank you. I've got a quick question here, if that's okay, before we move on to the next part. And I'm aware that, as I say, we've got lots of questions that we've not yet been able to answer. Got a question in relation to somebody who coaches someone who is new to rugby and is 1 week too old, their birthday being the 25th of August, and asking around playing down. My understanding is that the birthday date is the 31st of August, unless something's changed and I've not taken account of that. Is that the case, Mark?
Yeah, that's right. So it's basically midnight on the 1st of September is where the changeover happens of the ages. So yes, so that's the where the regulation sits. There are players who are right on the edge of that. We have to draw the line somewhere. And what we do is we draw the line alongside our education system in the UK. And that's, the same place we do it. There are some players who fall either side of that. Unfortunately, we have to have clarity on this. The grayer it is, the more we get issues with these types of things, and that's the same in all regulation, unfortunately. So yeah, if someone falls the wrong side of that 1st of September, midnight on the 31st of August, then they're into the different age group.
Lovely, thank you. I'm conscious of time, so if you wanted to move to the next bit, please feel free, everybody, to keep your questions coming. And as I say, we'll try and have a think about how best we can answer some of these more specific questions that we've had coming in if we don't have time this evening. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Viv. So in terms of support and advice, a little bit of do's and don'ts here, and hopefully this will be helpful for people. Might address some of the questions as well, Viv. Really quickly. So the why, and we've talked about this throughout, it's really critical to consider this carefully. We've definitely seen, and David touched on it, we've seen people moving straight to, I've got to play players out of age group before they think about the other options that might be available to them, talking to their opposition. There are plenty of other things that you can do with your age group to keep that group together and to look at trying to grow that. And we've seen some, being perfectly honest and open, we've seen some lazy practice on this as well. People moving to look to play players out of age grade when actually they haven't had a real go at trying to look at recruitment, etc. And I know that sounds a bit throwaway, but we need to cover every option before we move to that risk situation of moving people out of age group. There is a risk to the safety of the individual and other players, so consider that. What about your opposition if you've got older players playing with younger players, and finding solutions to keep it in the age group first, I think is really important. So that sort of covers the why a little bit. In terms of the what, assessment is really key, and that question about assessment was a really good one, talking about how we assessed and coaches and people involved in that. The process for playing out of age grade and applying for that helps that, and it talks about what you've assessed and is specific about the thing in asking questions about the things that we want to hear as approvers to be able to make a decision. And that decision-making process, there are people who are taking that role to approve or decline, who are in a situation where they're relying on the club, school, or college to give them really good information. They're not looking, well, they will be looking for, but they don't want to see copy and paste. They want to see proper assessment of individuals and groups of people, and that happens plenty of times. And our approvers are great. They throw it back and say, this is really important and high risk. You need to do it properly. So no one should expect to get away with just copying and pasting information from player to player. So that would definitely be a don't do that. Do look at really good assessment process and use the online forms as the basis to which you'll then have your conversations before you actually fill out the forms themselves, because they will cover the process to help you go through an assessment as well. But remember, it is about the individual. Combining is slightly different, as I said earlier, but it is about the individual and being really clear about the appropriateness of that young person to play out of age grade. So that's sort of covers the what. The how, and this is really keen, sort of referenced it a little bit throughout. It's been a bit of a thread. This is a team effort. This is a team effort between player, parent, coach, teacher, whoever is involved to create that proper assessment, and be clear that throughout your age grade section as a club or your teams as a school with what you're doing, and do it early as well, sort of flips into the when bit a little bit, but get ahead of the game on this, where you can see things are coming, and often you can see this if you think about it way out. and the opportunity that might be coming down the track for a player to play up who needs some extra develop or would benefit from that development, or a player who's struggling on what might happen in terms of them in future years and things as well. You can see that happening, so getting ahead of it is really important. Um, and getting that right level of detail in the information because you've talked to the various people involved, and you can make your application really with really strong information is hugely important, and it helps those who are going to make the decision to make the right decision as well. And just finishing off on the when, I've sort of said get ahead of the process. Support your approvers. You know, county and CB people are there to help, and also help to advise, give an approval or a decline. They will often, well, with decline, they will definitely give you the reasons why. Often our counties are great at also supporting when someone is approved and think about other things that a club should think about, etc. And most of your counties as well will tell you how long you need to do this beforehand. They will not be able to turn things around in 24, 48 hours. That is, if they can, that's definitely the exception. They need time, just as you need time to make the assessment, to put the application together. They need time to make a decision about something which is really important and critical, is high risk, and is a challenge potentially to player safety and welfare. So they're not going to be able to do that at the flick of a switch. They're going to want to do that with some real thought about what they've received in the application. So in terms of the when, do get ahead of that. And if there was a who on there, I'd reiterate what I said earlier. Think about safeguarding and your safeguarding colleagues in your club, school, or college being able to advise you as well on an application to play players out of age grade. Viv, any further questions on any of that?
Yeah, just we've got quite, as I say, quite a lot of questions. So what about managing disagreements? So perhaps disagreements within the club around individuals playing up, for example. If you've got disagreements within a club, would you expect the whole club, those that are involved within the club, to be agreeing or be in agreement with the process before, I guess, it gets to CB level for approval?
Yeah, definitely. That's part of, I talked about the declaration earlier.
Yeah.
That's about making sure the right people have been involved and are in agreement with making the application. And if there are disagreements within the club, that is for the club to sort out. We could advise on that, but our advice would be find a solution, because it's really important to make sure that everyone's comfortable. Because ultimately, if it was a club, everyone in that club would be the ones who would be safeguarding that young person if they were to play out of age group, wouldn't they? So yeah, the club agreement is critical in this.
Lovely. And you mentioned, Mark, about clubs kind of seeking the view of all those that are involved. So clubs perhaps having conversations with schools if there's school rugby being played. And I'm making an assumption that the same would be true if we had a school that was requesting one of their players played down, that there would be an expectation that that was in discussion with a club.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the young person who's playing in multiple environments, is all those people want to and should have an input into how that looks for that young person. And I think particularly playing down, because that's where the circumstances in which you play down are very much about the individual's well-being more than anything else. Although that's the same across all playing out of age grades. So I think that's a really important conversation to have. Recognizing realistically that's challenging, but playing someone out of age group, as we keep saying, that is something we want to make sure is done properly and done for the right reasons. So input of others into that is important.
Okay. And are constituent bodies involved in that approval for schools? Just wondering if there was any way that a coach would be able to clarify whether or not that consent had been given with an environment other than a club. and subsequent to that, when we have approvals that are given for playing up or playing down, is that recorded anywhere on GMS? So if a young person was to move club, for example, would that follow them?
Yeah. So if I'll take the second one first. So
Okay.
currently the approval processes aren't on GMS. It's something we want to look into, but GMS is much more at the moment about player registration, and that's what's being focused on there. The ambition would be to link to GMS, but currently it's a separate process. So it's not recorded on GMS, which sort of comes back to your first point, Viv, and the first question, which is therefore the conversation that needs to take place and the sharing of information is really important. Parents, whether it's a school application, a college application, or a club application, are on the application. Their email address is on the application, and they receive confirmation of an approval or a decline as well. So the involvement of parents is really important, and they would be the ones who would be the person to talk to in that scenario that you talked about in part one of the question. They will be the ones who will have that information, and it just emphasizes the importance of parents' involvement and their understanding of the implications of playing out of age grade as well, because often, clubs need to educate and inform parents of the implications as well.
Lovely, thank you. And there are quite a few questions about training. So, for example, different age groups training together, but perhaps not playing any games. Is that applicable as long as the drills, I guess, replicate what you would expect for that particular age group?
David, I don't know if you want to jump back in. It sort of follows on from your earlier.
Sorry, Viv, I was just looking at the questions. Can you say that again?
Yeah, there's just quite a few questions around training,
Yep.
I guess, and making sure that is it okay for different age groups to train together, but not necessarily engage in playing of games and matches to make both training more interesting, and I guess being able to expand the number of drills and the kind of training that's available, and just wanted confirmation that as long as they weren't engaging, I guess, in activity that was out of that particular age group's level of expertise, that would be okay.
Yeah, so we would take the same view with contact rugby here, is that they can play different age groups, but there should be no contact element if they're playing in a different age group and they don't have the relevant permissions or combining of teams. So recently we became aware of a under 12s playing a contact game with an under 13s team. That's a breach of regulation, and obviously that's something that would need to be looked at. So yeah, obviously training is allowed non-contact, but if there is any contact, then it should be in their normal age groups. There is a significant risk of injury, especially with age groups and different sizes of children, and we should do everything we can to protect that. So if in doubt, don't train the teams together, certainly not contact.
Thank you. There are a couple of just other comments in here. There's a couple of comments from our constituent body colleagues just around constituent body officers are volunteers too. So just being a bit mindful of workload, particularly as Mark said, the expectation from some clubs, I guess sometimes that they want a quick turnaround. If you know that, particularly thinking often with, I guess, 17-year-olds playing up, that you need to be well prepared for that, and CBs need some time to be able to consider all of that paperwork and all that information that you provide. So please don't feel that our colleagues are going to be able to do something, very quickly. Although we appreciate that you might have a game to be played, we need to make sure that those permissions are the right permissions and the right decisions for individual young people.
Yeah, that's a hugely important point, Viv. Really, really important.
Okay. And just to confirm, in terms of both the approval process for playing up or potentially for playing down, and the approvals for combinations, my guess is that that can be done at any time during the season. So it isn't something that has to be done right at the beginning of the season if circumstances change either for a club or for individuals.
Yeah, correct. So circumstances can change during the season. So the process is available season round. And what has happened a couple of times is a club has started off the season with a combined team, but actually has done some really good recruitment work. That doesn't mean they have to keep combining. It might mean they can split the group that was struggling might have recruited players and they're able to do that. So that could also change the other way during the season, couldn't it? So an application might be required later on to try and keep two groups playing who were separate, but might need to combine. So yeah, absolutely recognising that it needs to be a season round process, but there are probably some peaks and troughs a little bit in some areas, certainly at the start of the season and towards the sort of spring. Often we get a bit of a spike in 17s playing adult as well as some clubs start to think about what those 17-year-olds might want to do the season after in terms of their playing programme as well, particularly those who turn 18 early on or at the end of the year. So yeah, so we do get that, but it's available year round. Sorry, that was a really long answer to a short question. Apologies.
Thank you. I'm conscious that we've still got a fair few questions that have got pretty individual circumstances that we haven't covered yet. I don't know, David or Mark, if there's anything in particular that you've seen in the Q&As that you'd like to address now, or if there's anything else that you wanted to say. I'm conscious of we're just coming up now to 8 o'clock.
Viv, for me, I think your suggestion, sorry, David, just to jump in, I think your suggestion of us actually going back individually to those ones is we can do that because we've got the registrations for the webinar, which is great of everyone who came on. So we can do that. And also we it would be helpful, wouldn't it, to produce more Q&A of some of the points that we have covered here as well. I think it's a really good idea that we can do that and we can keep building on that as well. So yeah, definitely the more individual specific questions. I think we can pick those up afterwards, and it's just if there's any more general ones, then it might be we cover those in now and stay on for those. But yeah, certainly it feels like what I've seen from the question is probably done the broader topics, haven't we? But let's pick up the individuals as well afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. We've obviously got everyone's email addresses because everyone's registered to attend today. So perhaps we could draw some of those, even if they are quite specific, into some general comments that we might be able to email back, perhaps with a link to the recording as well.
Yeah, that sounds good. So if that's the case, Viv, I think we can probably draw things to a close then. We really grateful, and as Alex said at the beginning, big thank you to everyone for joining. I think I might reiterate a little bit. We're probably preaching here to people who know the system and are looking for more information. That said, it's been brilliant to have you on, and actually some of the things we've hopefully covered are helpful. We need to try and spread the word a bit more, and perhaps our Q&A might be a good way to do that. That said, really grateful for your time, and particularly, we've got a lot of people who are involved in creating really great playing experiences for young people playing our game. On this call, and there's so many others out there as well. And genuinely, a huge thank you for all you do, and giving up your time, on a Wednesday evening. Is it Wednesday? I lose track of time at the moment. This World Cup sends things mad. But a Wednesday evening to be with us this evening. We are there to support, and we will provide more information on this. And what we can also do now that we've got these central systems, we can look at where there are particular playing out of age grade examples in certain age groups or in boys versus girls or parts of the country and things like that. We're able to do that now. So we can probably individualize some of this a bit more going forward as well. So really keen to do that. And a number of our committees do look at what happens with playing out of age grade during the season and are looking at what are some of the answers and solutions to that as well. And just on that point, I'll finish with, we are doing a review through RFU governance of Regulation 15 this year. And we'll have a really good in-depth look at ways to make things simpler, more user friendly, but also making sure we maintain that sort of robustness in the regulations as well. So so it does support the people who are making applications as well as the individuals themselves. So I don't think there's anything else to add, Viv or David, to that.
I think I might just say that please, it's great to see so many people asking really proactive questions, and please do make use of the great expertise that we've got also within our constituent bodies. So your age grade governance colleagues within there would much prefer you ask questions early, I guess, rather than trying to do things in haste. So please use some of the expertise that we have there too. They will be in the main the organisation that are signing off your applications and things. So making use of the advice that they're able to provide you would be a great thing to do.
Thanks, Viv. David, anything to add from you? No? Great. Thanks very much, Viv and David. And again, massive thank you to everyone for joining this evening. As Alex said, recording will be available. We'll look at Q&A as well to go with that. And we will come back on some of those individual questions as well that you've submitted tonight. Thanks ever so much, everyone, and have a good rest of your evening. And we will catch up with you soon.